Vlad the Impaler. What kind of man throws a banquet for beggars and then burns the building down? How does a teenage hostage become one of the most feared rulers in history? So terrifying that even the Ottoman Sultan blinked? Why did a prince with only 10,000 peasants dare to challenge an empire with 70,000 soldiers and 120 cannons? Welcome to the twisted, blood-soaked legend of Vlad the Impaler, a man so brutal, so cunning, and so theatrical in his cruelty that history couldn't decide whether to fear him, admire him, or turn him into a vampire. So grab your goblet, sharpen your stakes, and settle in. Because by the end of this video, you'll know how Vlad weaponized fear to control kingdoms, why his enemies feared him more than death itself, what turned a historical prince into the world's most iconic monster. And trust me, you don't want to miss the part where he infiltrates an enemy camp, dressed as a soldier, and nearly assassinates the Sultan himself. Once upon a time in the 15th century, in the land of Wallachia, modern-day Romania, but with way more swords and fewer tourists, a young noble named Vlad II was living the medieval version of a diplomatic internship, except instead of coffee runs, he was a hostage at the Hungarian court. His host, Sigismund, King of Hungary and future Holy Roman Emperor, who was basically the medieval version of a Bond villain with a chivalric twist. Sigismund inducted Vlad II into the Order of the Dragon, a club for elite Christian knights who swore to defend Europe from the Ottoman Empire. Think of it as the Avengers, but with more chainmail and fewer superpowers. Vlad II became known as Dracula, meaning dragon. His son, Vlad III, would later be called Dracula, son of the dragon. Cute, right? Until you realize this kid would grow up to impale thousands. Wallachia was the medieval version of a reality show called Who Wants to Be Prince? The throne changed hands more often than a cursed ring in a fantasy novel. Thanks to noble polygamy and a family tree that looked like spaghetti, Vlad II's relatives were constantly stabbing each other in the back, sometimes literally, for a shot at power. By 1436, Vlad II seized the throne with Sigismund's blessing and a ragtag army of exiled boyars, Wallachian nobles who were basically medieval influencers with swords. But just as he was settling in, two things happened. The Ottomans invaded, and Sigismund died. Vlad II, ever the pragmatist, flipped sides like a pancake and pledged loyalty to Sultan Murad II. He even guided an Ottoman army into Hungary. Spoiler, it didn't go well. In 1442, Vlad II was summoned by the Sultan for a little chat. The Sultan, not known for his chill, imprisoned Vlad and his two youngest sons, Vlad III and Radu. Vlad II was eventually released, but he had to leave his boys behind and promised to send 500 children a year to the Ottoman Janissary Corps. That's right, Wallachia's version of a student exchange program involved child soldiers. Now, Radu was the golden boy. Handsome, charming, and fluent in Turkish, he became besties with Mehmed II, the future conqueror of Constantinople. Vlad III, on the other hand, was the goth kid in the corner, brooding, defiant, and frequently whipped for his attitude. He watched as fellow hostages were blinded with red-hot irons. He learned that betrayal was currency and cruelty was power. And he took notes. In 1447, Wallachia exploded into chaos. John Hunyadi, the Hungarian warlord with a vendetta and a sword collection, invaded. Vlad II was hunted down and killed in a marsh. His eldest son was blinded and buried alive. The throne was handed to a pretender named Vladislav. Because apparently, medieval Romania had a Vlad shortage. Enter folklore. A loyal boyar escaped the carnage, riding for 5 days through enemy territory to deliver Vlad II's sword and pendant to young Dracula. Standing in the Ottoman court, staring at the symbols of his father's legacy, the 17-year-old Vlad swore vengeance. Not just any vengeance. Cinematic, Shakespearean, blood-soaked vengeance. With Ottoman backing, Vlad Dracula marched into Wallachia like a man possessed. His enemies would soon learn that he wasn't just a prince, he was a storm in human form. He didn't just kill his enemies, he impaled them, on stakes in rows like grotesque garden gnomes. He turned cruelty into a political strategy, fear into a governing principle. And thus began the legend. Vlad the Impaler wasn't just a ruler. He was a myth, a monster, a man forged in the fires of betrayal and captivity. He was the son of a dragon, raised among serpents, and he would make the world bleed to remember his name. Picture this. Vlad Dracula, still a teenager, standing in the Ottoman court, probably still nursing emotional bruises from years of being the least favorite hostage. One day, Sultan Murad II calls him in, not for a whipping, but for a chat. And not just any chat. Murad delivers the news that Vlad's father and brother have been brutally murdered by John Hunyadi and his merry band of Hungarian crusaders. Vlad's reaction? Somewhere between "I knew it" and "I will burn the world." But Murad, ever the opportunist, follows up the tragic news with a job offer. "How about becoming an officer in my army?" he says, probably while sipping sherbet. Despite Radu's popularity and charm, Murad saw something in Vlad's cold, calculating eyes, a future ruler who wouldn't flinch at spilling blood. And let's be honest, Murad figured Vlad's loyalty was now sealed in trauma. After all, the Hungarians had buried his brother alive. That's not the kind of thing you forgive over tea. Meanwhile, in the Balkans, John Hunyadi and Vladislav, yes, another Vlad, because medieval Romania had a naming convention like a broken record, were marching into Ottoman-held Serbia. Murad, not one to let trespassers go unpunished, unleashed a devastating defeat outside Kosovo. The battle was so chaotic it was like a medieval version of a Black Friday sale, except instead of TVs, people were losing limbs. No one even knew if Hunyadi or Vladislav had survived. Vlad Dracula, now armed with Turkish cavalry and a thirst for vengeance. He stormed into Wallachia like a bat out of hell and seized the throne. It was dramatic. It was glorious. It lasted 2 months. Turns out Vladislav wasn't dead, just fashionably late. He returned with an army, booted Vlad off the throne, and sent him packing. Vlad fled back to the Ottomans, but even they were getting cozy with Vladislav. Sensing that his head might be part of the next peace treaty, Vlad bolted to Moldavia. And surprise, Moldavia was actually nice. His uncle was ruling, his cousin Stephen was heir, and Vlad got a Renaissance education, philosophy, military tactics, and probably how to impale with flair. He even helped repel a Polish invasion, which was basically the medieval equivalent of winning a regional championship. But good times don't last. His uncle was assassinated by a half-brother, because medieval politics were basically a soap opera with swords, and Vlad and Stephen fled to Hungary, where Vlad played hide-and-seek with Hunyadi. At one point, he narrowly escaped an assassination squad. Just your average Tuesday. Then came the twist. Sultan Murad died, and his son Mehmed took over, declaring his mission to conquer Constantinople. Hunyadi, meanwhile, was losing his shine. Vladislav was cozying up to the Ottomans, and Hunyadi needed a new Wallachian prince. Enter Vlad Dracula. Yes, the man who had every reason to hate Hunyadi now saw an opportunity. Politics wasn't personal. His father had taught him that by abandoning him to the Ottomans. So Vlad struck a deal. He became a noble at Hunyadi's court, swore allegiance to Hungary and the Catholic Church, and was tasked with defending Transylvania from Ottoman incursions. In 1456, Hunyadi marched to defend Belgrade from Mehmed's forces, leaving Vlad to keep Vladislav busy. Hunyadi won the battle, miraculously, but died of plague shortly after. Vlad, meanwhile, saw his moment. As he crossed into Wallachia, Halley's comet blazed across the sky. People saw it as a sign of doom or destiny. Vlad saw it as a cosmic thumbs up. He met Vladislav's forces outside Targovishte. Some say they fought a battle, others say they dueled in single combat. Either way, Vlad Dracula killed Vladislav with his own hand. He took the throne again, stamping his coins with the 5-tailed comet. But peace was a myth. Most boyars still supported Vladislav. One young noble even raised an army to dethrone Vlad. Vlad responded with his signature move, impalement. Stakes were sharpened, greased, and inserted with horrifying precision. The noble and his male kin were left writhing beside the road, dying slowly. Targovishte, Easter 1457. The boyars, dressed in their finest, toasted their new prince. "The past is forgotten," they said. Vlad smiled. Then he had them seized. The oldest were impaled immediately. The rest were marched to a ruined fortress, handed bricks, and told to rebuild it. No food, no clothes, no mercy. They died of frostbite, exhaustion, and despair. Vlad didn't care. He could appoint new nobles. And thus, Vlad the Impaler was truly born. His reign would be remembered not for diplomacy, but for terror. He turned cruelty into policy, vengeance into governance, and impalement into a national pastime. Let's set the stage. The 15th century was not exactly a time of gentle governance. Across Europe, Rulers were communicating with their subjects the way a horror director communicates with an audience, through gore. English kings decorated London Bridge with severed heads like it was a macabre flower arrangement. French monarchs broke people on the wheel, a device that turned bones into confetti. And the Spanish? Oh, they had the Inquisition, which was less about theology and more about creative ways to make you scream. This wasn't just cruelty, it was messaging. Public executions were the medieval version of a press release. Obey, or this will be you. But even in this brutal landscape, Vlad Dracula stood out like a blood-soaked thumb. When Vlad reclaimed the throne in 1457, he didn't just want to rule, he wanted to dominate. The Wallachian boyars, those scheming nobles who treated the throne like a game of musical chairs, had been manipulating weak princes for generations. Vlad had no intention of being their puppet. He embraced the Renaissance ideal of centralized power. Forget the church, forget the noble council. Vlad believed in one ruler, one law, and one very sharp stake. In a letter to the town of Brasov, he wrote, "When a man or prince is strong and powerful, he can make peace as he wants to, but when he is weak, a strong man will come and do what he wants to him." Translation: I'm strong, you're not, deal with it. Vlad's first move? A good old-fashioned purge. Between 1457 and 1461, he replaced all but 2 members of his royal council. The new recruits were loyalists, mercenaries, exiles, and lower-class boyars who owed everything to Vlad. The old guard? Let's just say they weren't around to complain. He redistributed land and wealth from the impaled to the empowered. And while records are fuzzy, even friendly Romanian folklore admits Vlad was extra. Thieves were beheaded, lazy peasants impaled, unfaithful wives skinned alive. Roma people boiled or conscripted. Priests who didn't show proper respect, nailed hats to heads. Diplomats who refused to remove their turbans. Same treatment. Vlad was enforcing morality with a hammer, and sometimes a spike. Now, let's talk about Brasov, the Transylvanian town that went from trusted ally to smoking ruin. Early in his reign, Vlad promised protection to Brasov if he ever needed to flee Wallachia. But the Saxons there were under pressure from Hungary to support one of Vlad's many relatives, like his half-brother Vlad the Monk, because apparently every Romanian family reunion needed a Vlad. Vlad tried diplomacy. He asked them to expel the pretenders. They didn't. By 1459, they backed a third pretender. Vlad's patience snapped like a dry twig. He impaled 41 Brasov merchants living in Wallachia. Then he burned 300 Saxons alive, accusing them of espionage. Then he led a 2-pronged attack into southern Transylvania, torching villages and slaughtering thousands. It was a message written in fire and blood. Brasov responded by backing yet another relative, Dan the Pretender. Spoiler: it didn't end well. After a brief battle, Dan was captured. Vlad had a grave dug in front of him, a priest read burial rites, and then, thwack, his head dropped into the pit. Vlad didn't just kill his enemies, he performed their deaths. By 1461, Vlad had stopped paying tribute to Sultan Mehmed II. The Sultan sent envoys, a Greek diplomat and a Turkish commander, to discuss the matter. Vlad greeted them with stakes, 2 taller than the rest, just for them. Then he crossed the Danube and unleashed hell. He burned villages, impaled thousands, and sent a letter to King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary boasting of 23,184 kills, not counting those burned in their homes. Vlad was declaring war. But Mehmed wasn't just any enemy. He was Vlad's childhood companion, and standing beside him, Radu the Handsome, Vlad's own brother. The stage was set for a showdown that would pit blood against blood, empire against fury, and stakes against swords. So, the Venetians, ever the savvy merchants, decided to fund a crusade to stop Ottoman expansion. They raised money, rallied support, and handed out gold like it was candy at a papal Halloween party. Pope Pius II was thrilled. Matthias Corvinus of Hungary, Frederick III of the Holy Roman Empire, and other European rulers all took the cash with the enthusiasm of kids at a birthday party. But then, nothing. Turns out, most Christian monarchs were less worried about the Ottomans and more concerned about their Christian neighbors. Because why fight the Turks when you could squabble over castles with your cousin? In desperation, Pope Pius even tried to recruit other Muslim states to attack the Ottomans. That's right, he was so fed up with Christian apathy, he went full diplomatic YOLO. Meanwhile, Vlad had his own problems. His cousin Stephen of Moldavia, whom Vlad had helped put on the throne, had switched sides and become an Ottoman vassal. Now Stephen was massing troops on Vlad's border, ready to pounce if Mehmed invaded. Which of course he did. In 1462, Mehmed and Vlad's brother Radu crossed the Danube with an army so massive it could have blotted out the sun. 60,000 to 70,000 troops and 120 cannons. Vlad had just 10,000 men, mostly peasants with pitchforks and bad attitudes. He tried to hold them off with cannons, but when the Ottomans fired back, he retreated. Knowing he couldn't win a pitched battle, Vlad went full guerrilla. He ordered civilians to flee to the Carpathians, scorched the earth behind him, poisoned wells, and sent cavalry to harass Mehmed's column. Then came the legendary night attack. According to folklore, Vlad disguised himself as a Turkish soldier, infiltrated the Ottoman camp, and pinpointed Mehmed's tent. That night, Wallachian cavalry screamed into the camp like banshees on horseback, slashing, burning, and impaling. Vlad stormed Mehmed's tent, only to find it empty. The Sultan had stepped out, probably for a midnight snack. Vlad retreated. The next day, the armies clashed. Vlad lost 2,000 men and abandoned Targovishte, fleeing to the mountains. But he left behind a parting gift, a forest of impaled bodies, men, women, children, Ottoman prisoners, all displayed like grotesque Christmas trees. One account puts the number at 20,000. Birds nested in the corpses. The stench was biblical. Mehmed, shaken but strategic, didn't press further. He had brought Radu the Handsome to replace Vlad, a man with charm, diplomacy, and zero interest in impaling anyone. Wallachian boyars, tired of Vlad's cruelty, defected to Radu like rats fleeing a flaming ship. Radu reached out to Saxons and nobles Vlad had terrorized, offering peace and stability. Sure, he was an Ottoman puppet, but at least he didn't boil people alive. Vlad was defeated, deserted, and hiding in the mountains. His only hope? Matthias Corvinus. Vlad sent desperate messages to Corvinus, begging for help. Corvinus arrived, with shackles. He didn't want war with Mehmed, but he did want to show the Pope he'd done something with all that crusade money. So he arrested Vlad, forged letters claiming Vlad had offered to attack Hungary in exchange for Ottoman support, and presented them as proof of treason. Even Corvinus's own historian thought the evidence was sketchy. But hey, politics. Vlad was imprisoned for 14 years. Eventually, he was allowed to live as an exiled noble, causing minor diplomatic incidents, like executing a Hungarian officer who entered his house without permission. Vlad argued it was justified. The court agreed. Because of course they did. While Vlad stewed in exile, Radu lost the throne. Vlad pushed Corvinus to let him return. Slowly, Corvinus gave him more freedom, letting him gather followers and settle in Transylvania. In 1476, Corvinus sent Vlad on military expeditions against the Ottomans in Bosnia and to help Stephen of Moldavia, whose relationship with Mehmed had soured. Then came the moment. A Hungarian army marched on Targovishte. Vlad and Stephen united their forces. They missed capturing the fleeing prince by inches. But in November 1476, Vlad Dracula became Prince of Wallachia for the third time. He had been a hostage, a fugitive, a prince, a prisoner, a general, and a legend. He had fought for Ottomans, Hungarians, Moldavians, popes, and sultans. His reigns were short, his methods brutal, but his legacy eternal. In Constantinople, a messenger stood before Mehmed the Conqueror, announcing Vlad's return. Mehmed, who had once raised Vlad like a brother, now saw him as a monster, a tyrant, a ghost. So, how did Vlad Dracula die? Well, pick your favorite ending. Option A. A messenger arrives in Constantinople with a box. Inside, Vlad's severed head, gift-wrapped for Sultan Mehmed II, a gruesome trophy from a battle lost. Option B. Vlad is betrayed by his own men, killed in the chaos of battle, and buried in an unmarked grave. Option C. He fakes his death, becomes immortal, and opens a boutique winery in the Carpathians. Okay, maybe not option C, but the truth is no one really knows. 2 months into his third reign, Vlad fought the Ottomans and lost. And while we have endless detail about how he impaled, boiled, and flambéed his enemies, his own death is a historical shrug, which, let's be honest, is kind of poetic. But death was just the beginning. Because when history leaves gaps, legend rushes in like a vampire at a blood bank. Remember Vlad's massacre of the Transylvanian Saxons in Brasov? Well, those Saxons had cousins in Germany, home to Europe's booming printing industry. and they were not about to let Vlad's atrocities go unnoticed. They turned him into a villain in pamphlets, books, and woodblock prints so lurid they made Quentin Tarantino look subtle. These weren't just smear campaigns, they were early horror literature. If it bleeds, it leads was the motto, and Vlad bled like a fountain. Religious texts like Foxy's Book of Martyrs leaned into the gore, and Catholic art followed suit. Vlad became the poster child for medieval monstrosity. Even the Ottomans joined the PR party, preserving tales of Vlad's cruelty to justify their invasion and make Hungary look like the world's worst talent scout. Early biographers added fuel to the fire. One Greek writer, while admiring Vlad's anti-Ottoman zeal, went out of his way to discredit Radu the Handsome. He claimed Radu converted to Islam and was romantically involved with Mehmed II. Now, whether that's true or just 15th century gossip is debatable. It only appears in one very anti-Ottoman source. But hey, welcome to the world of historical shipping. Yes, people ship historical figures. You can't unknow that now. Now, let's talk about the Irishman who turned Vlad into a household name, Bram Stoker. While researching his novel, he stumbled across the name Dracula and scribbled in his notes, "Dracula in Wallachian means devil." All caps. Very excited. But did he know Vlad III? Not really. Stoker's notes don't mention Vlad by name. He borrowed heavily from English vampire novels and a 19th century travel guide for Romanian geography. Sure, Dracula talks about raiding across the Danube and fighting the Ottomans, but the character is more Victorian aristocrat than medieval warlord. Fun fact, Stoker originally named his vampire Count Wampir. The book was going to be called The Undead. So yeah, we dodged a branding disaster. Today, tourists flock to Dracula's castle in Romania, a place Vlad probably never visited and Stoker definitely never saw. But it's still awesome. Gothic towers, misty mountains, and enough spooky vibes to make your Instagram followers scream. Outside Romania, Vlad is a monster. Inside Romania, he's a national symbol. After centuries of Ottoman domination, Wallachia and Moldavia united in 1878 to form Romania. Transylvania joined after World War I, and in the age of nationalism, countries needed heroes. Vlad fit the bill. A brutal but fair ruler who kept Wallachia independent and died fighting foreign powers. Sure, he impaled a few thousand people, but in the 19th century, that was just called strong leadership. Even today, Romanians debate whether to be proud of Vlad. Some see him as a patriot, others wince at the body count. But one thing's certain, he left a mark on history, on literature, and on every Halloween aisle from Bucharest to Brooklyn. And if you've made it this far into the twisted tale of Vlad the Impaler, congrats, you've survived the stakes. If you want more spine-tingling stories, historical drama, and dark legends served with a side of wit and wonder, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell so you never miss a drop of our next epic saga. Like, share, and follow us to keep the blood pumping and the stories flowing.